Hi, welcome to the Sew Along 2018 with GourmetQuilter. We're using these very delicious New Zealand fabrics by Nutex, and we're making some very delicious blocks with our fabrics. So you will have your pattern if you've purchased the pattern from GourmetQuilter.com for making these blocks. So this is going to be block 10 that we're working on this time, and we're making 2 of each block, and this is the block that we're doing this time. And there's going to be some cutting instructions in your notes, and we're going to be cutting out various sizes of squares. We've got a square in the middle, and we're going to have a square in the middle, and then we're putting a colour around it and another colour and some more triangles around it. So we start off with cutting squares of a few sizes, and then we're going to be cutting those in half diagonally. Not something I do a lot of if I can avoid it, because once you cut a square in half diagonally, that diagonal line there becomes very stretchy. It's what we call the bias of the fabric, and so it just means you've got to handle things a little bit carefully that things don't stretch out of shape. So I've gone ahead and cut all my triangles, well, my squares, and then I've cut them all into triangles, and I've got my centre square all ready to go. The other thing you may find handy to help you with this block is a small square ruler. If you have one, you don't need to have it. It's just one of those nice little helpful things that you can use if you have one. So block 10, I'm going to just go ahead and show you how we're going to make that block. I'll do a little bit of sewing, and so I've gone ahead, I've done all my triangles, my outer ones, my next ones, and then the first round of triangles, which in this case are this darkish green that I've got. Now I've gone ahead and already marked, in order to sew these on so that it's kind of fairly straightforward, I found the best thing to do is to mark the center point of 2 opposite sides of the square, and I found just a pin will work. You might find that like a pen would mark, anything, as long as there's a little marker that you've got the halfway point of the 2 opposite sides, and do exactly the same thing with 2 of the triangles. So you want to do it on that bias edge, so just be careful you're not stretching those bias edges. Fold that in half, find your center point of both of those. So I've already done my 2, and so then what we're going to do is we're going to position those together, right sides together, match up those markers, and we're just going to sew that seam. So what you're going to have is you're going to have some fabric sticking out at each end, and we want that to happen. It's not going to be an exact fit. We want that because of the seam allowance, and we're also going to be trimming afterwards as well. So you could go ahead and put both of those on. We're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch them, so I can do that quickly here. Just your regular 1/4 inch seam, just stitch, just keep those centers together, and then we're going to do the opposite side while we're at it. You can do that while that's all sitting there together. Match those centers, stitch that seam, and now we can, if we've used pins as the markers, we can take them out, and we're going to press that seam open. So I'll go ahead and do that. So I found the best way is to press one of the triangles down, but let the other one flip over as you get to it, and let that seam go out towards the triangle. Then turn that around and do the same thing in the opposite direction. So now that we've pressed that, we can do the same thing now with the other 2 triangles of the same colour. So pop your markers in, position the centres, and stitch that seam again. The corner should be sticking over the edge at both ends, so that should be about the right amount for your seam allowance. And we'll quickly do the last one of this round. And We'll take the pins out, and again we're going to press that. Same thing, just flip that one over while you've got one pressed down flat. And looking kind of good, okay, but we've got these funny little ears sticking out, but we're going to trim those off, so don't worry about those. It should be sitting fairly square for you now. And so now I'm going to show you how we're going to trim that so that it's the right size. Right, so I'm just going to go with you how I'm going to trim that. We need a cutter. Now you can use your regular ruler if that's your preference. I have a small square, so I'm going to use that. We're going to trim all four sides because we want it evenly trimmed all round. It's a slightly larger than we want it to be. So what I'm using here is this small ruler here, but just to help with the positioning, you can mark on the ruler. You can get a product, it's called glow tape. It's about 1/4 inch wide, and it's just sticky, like a little coloured sticky tape, and you can stick it onto your rulers to help you with positioning for markings and things like that. So it's fairly see-through, but it's just a little bit helpful. So what I'm going to do now is position that on the ruler. We want the square to measure 3 1/4 inches, it says on my notes. So I'm going to position, so I want my halfway mark of my square to be going right through the points, top and bottom and side to side as well. So you kind of have to position it from 4 directions. Now if you're not sure about that halfway mark, this would be a helpful place to put a piece of the tape on. So we could come down here and it would be just through there. So it's going to be to one side. So we're going to line up this side of our piece of tape with the 2 points on our square so that we come right, the centre mark is right through the centre, but don't forget you've got to also keep an eye on these sides because you want the sides to be right as well. So we are trimming a little bit off this. You may want to put a piece of tape top and bottom. It's really up to you how you would like to do that so that you get it marked and cut central to your block. You want it to have an even amount of seam all the way around it. And we're looking pretty good, I think. About there and about there. And then we're going to just trim off 2 sides at a time. So we're going to take that side, and that's going to take all those little ears away for you as well. So we've done 2 sides. Now we're going to turn it around, and now because I'd already put the markers for the full size on there, I now have to make sure that these 2 edges sit on that edge of that tape there. So this is a little bit easier this time. We only have to line those edges up because we got it right the first time for centering it. And then we're just going to trim off those 2 sides. And there we've got our nicely centered square with our seam allowance ready for the next round to go on. So on the next round, it's exactly the same. We're going to put our triangles on. We're going to mark the halfway of here. We can see the halfway, but if you want to pop another marker in there, we're going to do the 2 opposite sides, stitch them, press them, then the other 2 sides, and then we're going to trim again. So I'll go ahead and get all that bit done, and then I'll show you the next little bit of trimming as well. Okay, so I've gone ahead. I've put my 4 triangles on, just the same as we did on the first round, and now same thing, we've got to come and trim that block. So I've already marked up my ruler, and I've got my center line, so I want to line my center one up top and bottom. I want to see that this one here is sitting in the right place, and all the measurements for the trimming are on your notes. So we want that to be sitting nice and square again, and there and there, and we're looking pretty good. So same thing, I'm going to trim off the 2 sides, turn that around, position that now within my markings on my ruler. Now if you don't have a square ruler like this, you don't need to panic. You can mark up any ruler with the sizes and measurements. It's just that I did have one, so I thought I might as well use it. So you could just as easily put those markings that I've put on here onto your ruler that you've got, and create your own little square at one end, so that you can, same thing, you can do the two sides and then you can turn it around, and so that's an option for you. Or you may have another way of doing it. What you do need to make sure is that every time you're trimming, everything is sitting nice and central, so you're trimming all the way around. So we've gone ahead and done that, and now we've got to do exactly the same thing with our last round, which is our background fabric. So we're just going to, I'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll trim that one up as well. So I've gone ahead, I've done my block, and I've realised, of course, as I knew, that my square is not going to be big enough for that, so I am going to trim this one with the ruler so that you can see a slightly different way of trimming things. So we still need to measure, we're going to have to turn this one round extra times this time. So we're wanting to trim our block again this time, and so we want to find our centre mark, and if you wanted to mark it on your ruler, this would be an opportunity to do that. It could be any tape, of course. I happen to have this nice glow tape. There's no obligation for you to have it, but it's good stuff. Okay, so I've marked my centre line so that I can line up my top and bottom points there, and I'm just going to trim one side this time. So I'm just trimming off and straightening up that edge there. Now I can do the other side, opposite side at the same time now, if that's what I would like to do. Just keep an eye that your block is the right size, but as I said, the trimming measurements are in your notes. And I'm going to, so again, I've lined up my centre, so I'm on the opposite side now, and I'm just going to trim that edge off there. And so this, now I turn it this way and do exactly the same thing. Mark my, keep an eye on lining up my points there. So that's it for this time. That was the block I'd already done. There's the new one. They're the same size, it's always a good thing. So that's the end of block 10. So we'll see you again for block 11. Thank you.